You are the one they call when the moving truck is late and nobody else picked up. You are the one who remembers their coffee order, their mother's surgery date, the password to their old email, the exact way they like to be talked to after a bad day. You are the one who shows up at midnight without being asked twice. And somewhere underneath all of that reliability, a quiet, humiliating question starts to form. Not, do they need me? Because clearly they do. The question is smaller and sharper than that. Would they still want me here if I stopped being useful? Would I still have a seat at this table if I could not fix anything, remember anything, fetch anything, hold anything? That question does not usually get asked out loud. It gets swallowed over and over every time you are the one who is called on, and never the one who is chosen for. Nobody sits you down and tells you which one you are. You find out slowly, in the accumulation of 100 small moments, none of them dramatic enough on their own to complain about, all of them adding up to a very clear answer if you are honest enough to look at them together. If this kind of clarity helps your nervous system settle, subscribe. PsychBond is a daily decoder for psychology, relationships, and avoidant and anxious attachment patterns, so you stop guessing. Here is the distinction this entire video is built around, and it deserves to be stated plainly before anything else. Being useful and being chosen are not the same currency, even though they can look identical from the outside. Usefulness is transactional. It is measured in what you provide, how efficiently you provide it, and how much friction disappears when you are around. Being chosen is relational. It is not measured in output at all. It is measured in whether someone would still want your presence in a version of reality where you had nothing left to offer them. A tool gets used until it breaks or gets replaced. A person gets chosen, protected, and returned to precisely because of who they are, not because of what they were currently producing. Most people never have to find out which category they occupy in someone else's life because they are never tested on it. But if you are the one who consistently gets called for logistics, for comfort, for problem solving, and consistently gets passed over for the actual decisions about closeness, commitment, and future, you have already been tested, whether anyone announced it or not. This pattern does not confine itself to romantic relationships either, and it is worth naming that clearly, because narrowing this to one type of relationship would miss how widespread it actually is. It shows up in friendships where you are the one who organizes every gathering, remembers every birthday, and shows up for every crisis, yet somehow are never the first call when something good happens. It shows up in families where you are the reliable one, the responsible one, the one who holds everything together during a crisis, and are quietly overlooked the moment attention turns to celebration or simple enjoyment. It shows up at work, where you are the person everyone depends on to fix what is broken, and yet somehow never the person considered for the opportunities that would actually change your position. The common thread across every version of this is the same. Utility earns you access. It does not automatically earn you belonging. Let's talk about why this dynamic forms in the first place, because it rarely starts with anyone deciding to use another person. It starts with something much quieter and much harder to notice from inside it. Human relationships, like most systems, tend to organize around efficiency. If someone in your life has learned that you will absorb inconvenience without complaint, that you will show up reliably, that you will manage the emotional weather of a situation so they do not have to, their nervous system quietly recalibrates around that convenience. Not out of malice, out of the same instinct that makes anyone lean on whatever tool is already working. The tragedy of this pattern is that the very qualities that make you valuable, your reliability, your steadiness, your capacity to hold things, are the same qualities that let someone avoid ever having to develop the harder skill of choosing you on purpose, because they never had to. You were already there. There is an old evolutionary logic underneath this that makes it easier to understand without taking it personally. In early human groups, usefulness genuinely was survival currency. The person who could hunt, heal, build, or organize resources had a functional value that kept the group alive. But belonging, actual inclusion in the group's inner circle, its decisions, its future planning, was never guaranteed simply by being useful. Plenty of skilled, valuable members of early human groups still remained on the periphery of trust and status, because usefulness and belonging were tracked by different mental systems even then. Your nervous system did not invent this split. It inherited it. Being needed activates one very old reward circuit. Being chosen activates a completely different one, tied to actual social bonding rather than resource exchange. And the discomfort you feel when one is present without the other is your body correctly noticing that these two systems are not actually the same thing, no matter how much they can look alike from the outside. This is the part that stings the most, so it is worth sitting with directly instead of softening it. Being consistently useful can actually lower the odds that someone chooses you, not raise them. Because choosing requires effort, uncertainty, risk, the possibility of losing you and having to live with that loss. A person only develops the muscle of choosing when the alternative, losing you, feels real and costly. If you have made yourself so reliably available that losing you never feels like a live possibility, you have accidentally removed the exact pressure that would have forced a real decision. Your steadiness, which should have been a gift, becomes the very thing that lets someone postpone ever having to decide what you mean to them. Now, let's name the signs of this pattern clearly, one at a time, because vague discomfort is much harder to act on than a named list of what is actually happening. The first sign is that you are contacted for functions, not for connection. The messages that come your way tend to start with a need. Can you help me with this? Do you know where I put that? Can you talk me through this decision? Rarely does a message arrive that simply says, "I was thinking about you," with nothing attached to it, no favor riding along behind the warmth. The second sign is that your presence increases during their crises and disappears during their calm. This one echoes a pattern many of you already know from other videos on this channel, but it applies here specifically to utility as well. You are summoned when something is broken, urgent, or overwhelming, because that is when your usefulness is highest. And you fade into the background the moment things settle, because a calm day does not require fixing, and fixing is where your value has been located. The third sign is that you are excluded from the decisions that would actually define the relationship, even while you are included in nearly everything else. You may know their daily schedule, their family history, their deepest insecurities, and still, somehow, not be part of the conversation about where this is going, what this actually is, or what the future looks like. You have access to their life. You do not have a vote in it. The fourth sign is that gratitude replaces investment. You get thanked, often warmly, often sincerely, for everything you do. What you do not get is anyone asking what you need in return, or noticing when your own reserves are running low. Thanks is cheap to give, and does not require anyone to change their behavior. Investment is expensive because it requires reciprocity, and reciprocity is exactly what a utility-based dynamic is built to avoid. The fifth sign is the quiet replaceability test that never gets said out loud but is always sitting underneath the relationship. If you ask yourself honestly whether this person would go through real effort, real discomfort, real risk to keep you specifically, rather than simply finding the next available version of what you provide, and the honest answer makes you uneasy, that unease is not paranoia. It is your nervous system doing the math nobody wanted to do out loud. Once you can see the signs clearly, the next step is applying what we call the capacity filter, because naming the pattern is not the same as knowing what to do about it. The capacity filter is a simple set of questions that separates real chosenness from utility dressed up as closeness, and it works by testing what actually happens under pressure, not what gets said in comfortable moments. Can they build? This means, do they take active steps to move the relationship somewhere? Plans, introductions, future language? Or does the relationship simply stay in the exact same place it has always been? Permanently useful, permanently undefined. Can they choose? This means when there is a real alternative, a competing interest, another obligation, do they choose you visibly? Or do you consistently come second to whatever is more convenient in the moment? Can they repair? This means when something between you actually breaks, a hurt feeling, a moment of disrespect, a real conflict, do they engage with the repair? Or does the relationship simply reset back to function once the immediate need for your usefulness resumes? Can they commit? This means not necessarily to marriage or any specific milestone, but to language and behavior that acknowledges what you are to each other, out loud, consistently, not only in private, low-stakes moments. Can they sustain? This means, does their attention toward you hold steady across ordinary time, or does it spike only when your usefulness is being called upon and taper off the rest of the time? If most of these questions come back empty, you are not looking at a slow-building relationship that simply needs more patience. You are looking at a stable, self-sustaining arrangement where you provide value and receive gratitude. And gratitude, no matter how sincerely offered, was never a substitute for being chosen. It is worth distinguishing this pattern from something it sometimes gets confused with, which is healthy interdependence, where two people genuinely rely on each other's strengths without either side becoming purely functional to the other. In a healthy dynamic, usefulness flows in both directions and shifts over time. Sometimes you are the one holding things together, sometimes they are, and the roles move depending on circumstance, rather than staying permanently fixed. The marker of the unhealthy version is not that you help, and it is not even that you help more often than they do in a given season. The marker is rigidity. If the roles never rotate, if you cannot remember the last time someone showed up for you the way you consistently show up for them, and if raising that imbalance gets met with defensiveness rather than genuine adjustment, that rigidity is the actual problem, not the help itself. It is worth being fair here, because this pattern is easy to misread in the wrong direction too. Not every relationship where you help, support, or show up is automatically a utility trap. Reciprocity does not have to be perfectly symmetrical at every single moment to be real. People go through seasons where one side needs more than the other, and that alone does not mean you are being used. The marker is not whether you are helpful. The marker is whether helpfulness is the only currency this relationship trades in, whether your value has ever been tested outside of what you provide, and whether the capacity questions above show any real movement over time, even slow movement, rather than a flat line that never changes, no matter how long you wait or how much you give. It is also worth being fair in the other direction, toward the person on the other side of this pattern, at least in part. Not every case of relying heavily on a useful, steady person is calculated or cruel. Some people fall into this dynamic the same way you fell into providing it, without ever consciously deciding to treat someone as infrastructure rather than a person. That does not make the pattern acceptable to live inside indefinitely, and it does not obligate you to keep absorbing the cost of someone else's unexamined convenience. But understanding that this often happens without malice can help you approach the conversation, if you choose to have one, from clarity rather than resentment, which tends to land better and reveal more honestly whether real change is possible. Let's talk about why this pattern is so difficult to walk away from once you notice it, because noticing it and leaving it are two very different things, and the gap between them deserves honesty instead of a simple instruction to just leave. Being useful gives you something real, even inside an unequal arrangement. It gives you a role, a sense of being needed, a place where you clearly matter in the moment, even if you do not matter in the larger, structural sense. For a nervous system that has learned, somewhere earlier in life, that being needed is the safest, most reliable way to secure closeness, walking away from a role where you are constantly needed can feel like walking away from safety itself, even when that safety was never actually safety, just familiar function. There is also a specific kind of guilt that shows up the moment you consider stepping back from this role, and it deserves to be named honestly. It rarely sounds like guilt about yourself. It sounds like concern for them, worry about what will happen if you stop holding things together, a quiet conviction that everything will fall apart without you there to manage it. Sometimes that concern is accurate. More often, it is the residue of a role you were never actually asked to audition for, one you simply stepped into because the space was open and nobody else filled it. The discomfort of finding out whether things genuinely need you or whether they only needed whoever was willing to do the holding is real. But it is information you deserve to have, even when the answer is not the one you were hoping for. This often has an earlier chapter too. If you grew up in an environment where love felt conditional on what you provided, where being helpful, easy, low maintenance, or emotionally available for other people's needs was how you earned your place, being useful will not register as exploitation. It will register as normal, even comfortable, because it matches a template your nervous system has been running for a very long time. The adult relationship built on utility does not feel foreign in that case. It feels like coming home to a role you already know how to play perfectly. There is also a quieter cost that builds slowly, one that rarely gets discussed directly. Every time you are chosen for your function instead of your presence, you learn, a little more each time, to lead with what you can offer instead of who you actually are. You start performing your usefulness before anyone even asks for it, anticipating needs, managing moods, softening situations, because some part of you has learned that being needed is the entry fee for being kept around at all. Over enough time, this can quietly erode your sense of your own worth outside of output, until it becomes difficult to imagine anyone wanting your company for no functional reason whatsoever, just because you exist. You may notice this show up in small, specific habits: answering messages instantly, regardless of your own capacity in the moment, apologizing before asking for anything, downplaying your own needs so you remain easy to keep around, volunteering your help before anyone even has to ask. None of these habits are character flaws. They are adaptations, learned in an environment where being effortless to have around felt like the safest way to guarantee you would not be left out or let go. So, what does this actually mean, practically, without turning this into a lecture on how to fix another person's willingness to choose you? Because you cannot manufacture someone else's capacity, and trying to will only exhaust you further. The first thing worth doing is running the capacity filter honestly, on paper if it helps, rather than relying on a general feeling. Vague unease is easy to talk yourself out of. 5 specific answers written down, based on what has actually happened rather than what you hope will happen, are much harder to argue with. The second thing worth doing is noticing the shape of your own contact log. Look honestly at the last 20 messages between you. Count how many arrived attached to a need versus how many arrived simply because someone wanted your company with nothing riding on it. That ratio will tell you more about your actual role in this relationship than any conversation about feelings ever could. You can watch this play out in painfully specific moments if you pay attention. You are the one texted at 11 p.m. when their car won't start, but not the one told first when they get exciting news. You are looped in when plans need coordinating, but left off the group photo caption that names who actually matters. You are trusted with the hard, heavy parts of someone's life: grief, stress, logistics, and quietly excluded from the light, celebratory parts, the parts where people choose who gets to stand closest to them. Function earns you the backstage pass. It rarely earns you a seat in the front row. The third thing, and this is the one that actually tests the pattern rather than just describing it, is deliberately withdrawing your usefulness for a short period. Not as punishment, not as a manipulation, but as information. Stop being the one who remembers, fixes, and manages for a week or two, and watch closely what happens. If the relationship simply goes quiet along with your effort, that silence is the answer. If someone actually notices your absence as a person and reaches for you rather than for what you used to provide, that reaching is real information too, in the other direction. The fourth thing worth doing has nothing to do with them at all. While you test this pattern, your own nervous system needs somewhere to put the discomfort of temporarily not being needed. That discomfort is not a sign you are doing something wrong. It is a sign of exactly how much of your sense of safety has been built on being useful rather than simply being present. You can say to yourself, plainly, "This discomfort is old. It is not new information. It is my body relearning that my worth does not have to be earned through output every single time." The fifth thing worth doing is deciding in advance what you will actually do with the information the withdrawal test gives you. It is not enough to run the experiment and simply feel sad about the result. If the silence confirms what you suspected, decide ahead of time whether you are willing to keep providing at the same level indefinitely, knowing now what that silence means, or whether you need to start redirecting the energy you have been pouring into being useful toward people and situations that have already shown they would choose you without needing a test to prove it. This is not about becoming less helpful out of spite or performing unavailability to manufacture appreciation, Both of those are just utility wearing a different costume. It is about letting your presence carry weight on its own, separate from what your hands are currently doing for someone else. You are not asking for too much by wanting to be chosen instead of merely relied upon. Being useful is not a character flaw, and it is not something to apologize for or stop doing altogether. But usefulness was never meant to be the entry fee for belonging. It was meant to be one small part of a much larger mutual exchange, one where you are also allowed to need, to be inconvenienced sometimes, to exist without constantly justifying your presence through what you provide. You deserve a place in someone's life that would survive you having nothing left to give, because that is the only kind of place that was ever real to begin with. Somewhere in all of this, it is worth remembering that wanting to be chosen, not just relied upon, is not an excessive request. It is the most basic form of mattering there is, the kind that does not require you to prove your value through output first. Usefulness can open a door. It was never supposed to be the only reason anyone let you stay in the room. If this helped your body feel a little safer, liking or following this, wherever you're listening or watching, helps it reach someone else who needs this clarity. Welcome to PsychBond. You're safe here.